Hi, this is John. Been wanting to record a video about an old-fashioned type of candy you just don't see around anymore. They're called Opera Twist or Opera Curls. I'm going to walk through how I go about making both of them. Before we get into that, though, people always ask, this is the recipe I use: 4 cups of sugar, 1 cup of water, 1 1/3 cups of corn syrup, and then I heat it up to 300 degrees or sometimes a little hotter if it's humid out. Add my flavoring and my colors and sometimes some citric acid. So I found these candies in an old book from 1908 called The American Candy Maker by Charles Hulling. And what it was basically two things. One called Opera Curls, using a pretty standard recipe, but basically pulling out a small roll of candy and twisting it around a center axis. So you get essentially what looks like a curled piece of candy. And the other was called an Opera Twist. And it's similar to an opera stick or similar to a stick candy, except it's got a more of an edge to it, and it's just a little bit more interesting. You can actually get this book for free online if you look it up on the internet, and you can just download it as a PDF. Turns out I did some looking and actually found an example of opera twists. These were called opera sticks by the Bundt Company in Chicago. These are probably in the early 1900s. They're actually sold on eBay with the candy intact. I have no idea what they would have tasted like, but it was good to see an example. In the case of Opera Curls, I haven't been able to find any examples, but in the old Thomas Mills catalog, you can see a couple pieces of equipment that were built for the purposes of making these curled candies. And with a little bit more digging, I actually found a picture of one of them. This is one here. It actually curls the candy and snaps them off in small pieces, which I thought was really interesting. So let's try and make some. So I'm going to start off with pouring out my hot candy here. It's already cooked to 300 degrees. I'm making 2 pools because one's going to be red and one's going to be a white, really pink in this case, because this is watermelon, and watermelon has a little bit of a red color to it in the flavoring. I'm adding some citric acid here. I typically add about 1 teaspoon of the acid to a batch this size. I used 2 here, so it was a little bit more sour with the watermelon, but, tasted great. Mixing in the colors here. I'm mixing it around mostly just to boil off any water that might be left, trying to keep as much water out of the candy as possible. And then as it cools, I'll start pulling the cool parts into the middle. Again, I've sped this up, so I'm moving about twice as fast as I really did, but just to move the video along. And all I'm doing now, again, is trying to get the temperature as uniform as I can and the color as well. On the smaller piece, I'm going to pull that quite a bit to try to make it as close to white as I can, so it sets it off from the darker red color. And you'll see me just kind of work the candy here for a little bit as it cools down. I also set this so you could see my it's a pancake griddle, which I use as a hot plate with some Silpat mats on it, and that's really helpful for me because it helps to control the temperature of the candy and gives me some more time to work with it. So I pull it for a little bit, and then I just let my hands cool because it's still really hot. So again, like I said, this will be more of a pink than a white because of the color of the watermelon flavoring, but it'll be great for what we're trying to do. So the first trick of making the opera twist is to start forming your triangle structure. And so I'm just going to make a large triangle shape out of the mass of red, which is going to be the main color. And then my highlights will be the pinkish white color on the edges. You can do whatever colors you like. I've done a lot of different colors. I kind of like the lighter color on the outside. Just kind of sets it off nicely. But you could, in theory, do 3 different colors if you wanted. So I'm going to use a spatula here as it's cooling to try to keep this triangle shape. It's a little bit warm still, but I think it'll work for what I want to do. I'm just going to keep rotating it to try to get a nice sharp triangle shape. All right, now I'm going to divide the white color into 3 sections, 1 for each edge of the triangle. So the paper towel just has a little bit of water on it, very, very little actually, and it's just to get a little bit of moisture on the candy. That helps the 2 colors stick together nicely. You don't probably need it every time, but when your candy's this hot, but if it cools down a little bit, it really does help the two pieces adhere to each other. Not so much that you would get it wet by any means, just a little bit. All right, now you can see my triangle with my white edges, and that's what I'm going to use to make both the twist and actually the opera curls, but it won't be that triangle shape anymore. So dividing it in half, because that second half I'm going to use to make the curls, and the first half I'm going to use to make the twists. And you can see what I'm doing now is just stretching out that triangle shape and try to get them into thinner stick type sizes. In the directions, it mentioned to me having an assistant next to you, basically to put the triangle together and one to cut and twist. I could see how that would be handy, because it is a little bit of a trick to get this all to work quickly together, especially if we want to make smaller versions of it, or more like the smaller twist. So I don't know if you can see already, but you can kind of see the edges kind of stand out, so it's more, instead of a stick, you get this sort of sharper edge to it, which is actually kind of fun, and it makes it more interesting as a candy to eat as well. I'm going to try to make them a little bit thinner than I'm doing now. You kind of see they're a little bit thick, and we'll just see how it goes. The thinner it gets, the more you have to control temperature, because if it gets too cold, your edges start getting a little rough as the candy cracks. But if you can get it just right, you can get a pretty thin twist and still get a nice shape. So again, I sped this up, so I'm going about twice as fast as I did when I really made it. But I didn't want you to get bored with it. It does help if you're making this, if you want to really make them nice, is to cut the ends off, because whenever you twist the candy, the ends are always a little thicker and a little harder to twist and make them uniform. But you could, in theory, crack those off, but I think it's fine the way it is. When this is said and done, I'm doing these, and you can see about 6 to 12 inch things, but I'm going to break these down to 3 or 4 inches a piece, more typical to what you saw in the example from the Bundt company. I think those are all 4 inches long, and I'll break them in. That actually works well with my packaging as well for the candy. I have smaller candies work. You can also see here, one of the nice things about this hot plate and the Silpat mats is if it gets too hot, I can just pull them off, let them cool down a little bit. Makes it a little bit more easy to handle, and if it gets too warm, I can just double up the mats and cool the whole system down a little bit. So it cools down a little bit, it makes actually a nicer twist. You kind of see it in some of these going on now. So. The larger mass that we're going to use for curls, I just keep rotating around to keep it warm. All right, so this is my portion that's the opera twist. Like I said, I'll break these into smaller pieces later, but they are pretty cool, and they make a nice, especially if you get it just right, a nice twist candy. Almost like a licorice. All right, so now we're going to move into the opera curls, and I obviously didn't have a curling machine. I've done this before, just using a cylinder of some sort. You could use a pencil even, I suppose. But I actually bought this antique apple core that was partially built, and I modified it by putting a square rod on the end of it to act like a candy curler. And shockingly, it actually works really well. and I'll show you what that looks like. So the first one I'm going to do in real time, and then I'll speed it up for the rest so you don't have to, just don't make this video too crazy long. So I'm just going to keep rolling this out till I get a nice thin rope and get it started. Like I said, this is actually, it's a square rod, which actually helps, I think, grip it a little bit for this, but it works pretty nicely. And so it just twirls it now, and you get this nice curly rod shape, or curly candy shape. And I just slide them off while they cool down, and I'll keep doing these until I'm done. And then when those are done, I'll break them up into, again, 3, maybe 4-inch pieces. Make some, fun and interesting to eat. Again, you could stripe these any way you wanted, and the candy can make different versions of it. I'm just using the same mix that I did for the twist. If you've actually seen these in production somewhere or have examples of it, I'd love to see it. I haven't been able to find any examples of opera curls in today's market, and really any opera twist anymore, even just that one example from way back. You can make them thick or thin, and I actually kind of like the thin ones. They're a little more interesting and a little more fragile, I guess. All right, coming down the end of it here. This is, move the camera around so you can get a closer look at them. You can see the curls. That looks like, cool little curls. And at this point, they're cool enough I can break them down into smaller pieces that I can package up. And I'll do the same thing with the twist as well. I guess I'll probably package these together. I don't usually do them that way, but, something different. So that is pretty much how I go about making what are old-fashioned opera twist and opera curls. Not too hard. I encourage people to give it a try, especially if you're into candy making. It's fun and different, and it keeps an old technique alive. And hopefully you get, practice makes perfect. If you want to see any of the other candies I make as my hobby, you can see them at my website at daygamecandy.com, or you can find me on Facebook as well. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.